Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well, wherever you are, and that you're not being too badly affected by all the changes that are happening in various pockets around the country. Thanks very much for joining this webinar. It's 2 o'clock, so we'll make a start. I think there may be a few other people coming to join us. So I hope you're all well, and I hope the sun's shining as much where you are as it is here. So 6 months ago, I think we probably, or many of us assumed, I certainly did, that by this stage, the late September, things would be getting back to normal and we'd all be looking back nostalgically at the lockdown we had to endure in the spring. The challenges of March and April seem almost like a different year ago now, but as we're seeing, it continues to be a really difficult time for many people, an increasingly complicated picture for us all. Sometimes I think it feels hard to make sense of what's going on, and the implications for us both in the short term and over longer periods are complex. We here at RDA UK are absolutely determined to provide the support and the leadership over the next few months and years to help your group, whatever your situation. And I just want to spend a bit of time this afternoon sharing a few of my thoughts about this, some of the implications and some of the things that we're doing. So in a normal year, for many groups, this is a time of change and renewed energy as schools return, the summer holidays end, and of course it is genuinely the start of a new term. Over the past few weeks, we've seen society across the UK pick up this sort of theme more generally, and in a way it's felt a bit like a sense of the ending of the worst of the crisis. I've seen this personally, as I'm sure many of you have. My children have gone back to university, and our dog has been left mournfully wondering where everyone's gone and who he's meant to play with now. But we're also clear that for RDA, this is absolutely not the end of the challenge. As of today, a little over a quarter of our groups are open, but we're fairly sure that only a very small proportion of those groups participants are actually active, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. I'm really grateful to all the people, the trustees, volunteers, participants and supporters of those groups for the work that you've done to get things back up and running again, even if it is on just a small scale. I know it's been incredibly hard work, complicated and sometimes a bit scary, but it really is heartening for us to hear and see stories and reports of participants getting going again, and I know that they really appreciate the opportunity. However, as I just said, the majority of our groups remain closed and inactive, and I want to be absolutely clear that we support you and those groups equally. While I realise that you probably feel pressure, maybe from here and elsewhere, to reopen, I completely recognise that circumstances vary, and there are a myriad of reasons why you don't feel able to open again. We know there are groups where riders are unable to return yet, especially those in school groups. There are groups for whom there are problems with making the venue safe, particularly those that don't control or own their venue. And there are the more commercial centres where it just doesn't make financial sense to get going until more people can return. So please don't feel that our support for you is any different. We stand behind your decision and respect that you have had to make that decision, and it's probably been difficult. But I hope you'll understand that as a national body, our role is to be on the side of reopening and to help and support the process of reopening for those who can. So we will continue to work on that basis as well. The ever-changing rules on how we manage the pandemic, which previously were just across the 4 main UK jurisdictions, but now seem far more complex with the introduction of local lockdowns and variations as we've seen today, mean that it can be hard for all of us, but especially for those groups that are open, to understand what you can and should be doing. So do please keep checking our advice on the MyRDA website and through your regional teams. The team here is working really hard to keep the advice up to date. We're working very closely with the British Equestrian Federation and the relevant government agencies on the guidelines that we produce and as such are governed by, and the rules that are agreed and applied to us, which come through the sporting side. As we've heard on the news in the past few days, there's definitely potential for the situation to worsen. And please know that we're working hard both to make sure we have things in place to help operate safely within the guidelines, but also to do what lobbying we can so that people can stay open where it's safe and appropriate. In order for us to provide you with the support that you need and to learn from what has already happened, we launched a new survey yesterday, and I'd be really grateful if either you or someone within your group could spare us 5 minutes to complete that survey. It's going to give us two important sets of information. First, we want to know from those groups that are open, the extent to which you're open and what you're doing for your participants. We have a reasonable idea and think the average is about 10% of participants are actively engaged at open groups. But it's really important for us to understand this more clearly and also to know what is working well and what are the choices and decisions that you've been faced with and that you've had to make. Secondly, the survey will help us to better understand the principal barriers that groups which are not open are facing. As I've said, we have some anecdotal evidence of this, but we need a full and a better picture. And I hope we can match the work that's been done by groups that have overcome some of these barriers with the challenges that you face and provide more support. I recognise that it will be challenging for many groups to open, but we're determined to provide you with the support and advice to make this happen, and where possible to use prior experience for that. Excuse me. These two bits of information will help us tailor the support and advice we give over the next few months and help us help you, whatever your situation. Importantly, I think the information will also allow us to let people who support RDA and those we need to influence better understand the challenges we're all facing. As we move through the next phase of this, we're already changing the way we operate here to manage the situation we find ourselves in. Like many of you probably doing, I'm beginning to question the traditional way that we've worked and delivered services and having to consider a very different way of operating. Just some of the practical issues like working from home and using Zoom have fundamentally changed how we can work, and much of that won't change back. Personally, I'm finding there's a mixture of responses to this. Sometimes I feel drawn back to what's gone before and making sure, or wanting to make sure, that we return to that. However, in other areas, I'm really excited about new possibilities and new ways of doing things. My sense is that RDA will not be the same as it was, say, this time last year for a very long time. We may never even return to that. In reality, I suspect that some groups and activities will eventually restart in much the same way, and some groups will have to innovate and find new ways of doing new things. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. It's a variety of approach like this that has led us to be the strong organisation that we are. As an example, 10 years ago, we introduced show jumping as a new activity, and that came in as a result of demand from participants who wanted to do it and volunteers who wanted to support it. Today, about a third of our groups are delivering show jumping, or would be if they were allowed to some extent, and it's a core part of the RDA offering. Similarly, there are groups that are comfortable that it's not the right activity for their riders who don't engage with it. So I'm certain there are things being tried and developed today that will continue well past the current pandemic. And as I said, I think this is exciting and is the more optimistic side of the things that we're all facing. I heard this morning about a group working with the local primary school to deliver practical horse care and management sessions in the school. They're doing it without a horse, of course, but this is a completely new activity for them, but one which they're going to develop and which might endure for many years. I'm sure they're not the only kind of group doing this kind of thing, and we need to pick it up and support it. So just as you may be considering what new options open up in front of you and how to embrace them, we're doing the same. This can be a bit unsettling, I think, but I firmly believe we must embrace the opportunity to be bold in what we do going forwards. So I suspect and to some extent I hope that RDA emerges from this crisis as a blend of traditional knowledge and experience, the kind of things that we've developed over the last 50 years and quite rightly have a really great reputation for, working alongside whole new ways to deliver our service and benefit the people we work with. We must always remember that those people who set up RDA in the 50s and 60s, who some of you will have known, were innovators who saw the power of the activity and worked hard to define how best to deliver it. Sadly, many of them are no longer with us, but if they were, I'm sure they would be at the forefront of challenging me and you to respond to this crisis with both creativity and confidence. So we're taking this seriously, and alongside the work to support you and promote what's happening, we're thinking hard about how we can reorganise ourselves to be more flexible and dynamic so that we pick up these opportunities and run with them, something that I'm confident we'll be able to do. You'll hear more about our thoughts and plans on this as they become more crystallised and developed. Picking up one of the core activities, a few people have asked me specifically about carriage driving, and I want to respond to this directly now. I know there's been discussion as to why we're not yet sanctioning this activity, despite the fact that, for example, people are allowed to have a driving lesson in a car sitting next to an instructor. I realise this is frustrating, but as I mentioned earlier, we're working closely with colleagues at the British Equestrian Federation, and we're guided by oversight from the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. For us to get driving going, we'd need to arrange clear and strict protocols with the government, which I suspect is what the car driving schools have managed to do through their governing body with their respective bit of the government. Currently, DCMS aren't supporting any move towards this to allow carriage driving. We're in touch with British Carriage Driving to work on this, but I'm afraid at the moment there are no agreed protocols in place, and so we can't let it get going in its traditional fashion. We will, of course, update you as soon as there's any news, and I hope that'll come sooner rather than later. In all of these processes and decisions, please rest assured that we're working as hard as we can to try and get things up and running for you. We're all aware that there are many competing needs and different agencies providing different input. And our strategy from the start has been to try and distill this and be as clear and direct as possible with our advice about what's necessary. I realise this means that sometimes the advice that changes fast, and it's been really frustrating for us when, for example, the government of one or more parts of the UK changes their guidance 5 minutes after we've sent an email out to you. We realise that we're treading a fine line here, and while I'm proud about the advice we are managing to get out quickly, I also accept that with all the pressure, sometimes things aren't perfect first time, so please do bear with us. While on this subject, I want to let you know that we are going to change the way we communicate with you and your groups. This is a subtle change, I think, but from next week, we'll be sending out a weekly email every Thursday to groups. This will contain any important updates and other information, but rather than it coming out ad hoc, as is currently the case, it will become a fixture of a Thursday. Clearly, if there's any important and immediate news that we need to get out or changes, we will send this when it needs to go. But other than this, changes to our guidance and policies will be changed on the MyRDA website, which will always be current. So I hope this means you'll continue to have access to the advice you need and understand what we're doing, but without receiving too much information from us. We've also been working really hard on external communications, and I have an ongoing concern that as people try and get things back to normal, organisations like RDA get slightly overlooked in terms of the ongoing impact. As my wife and probably many of my colleagues will attest, this is a favourite bugbear of mine, and I can go on about this for hours. But there's an increasing sense that we're moving into this so-called new normal, and that the situation is stabilising, or at least there was before the last few days. As I said, people are returning to work, in some cases to their offices, schools are back and universities are filling up. However, as I also stressed earlier, we know this is not the case across RDA. If we're right about the numbers of people active within groups, and the survey will help us define that, we're currently working at about 3% of our capacity. Yeah, that's 3%. We'll turn the other way around, 97% of our riders and drivers are currently not able to access the service. So we are a long way from fully open and definitely not working as normal. As I've said, we know that some groups have decided to close for longer periods, and even with all the work going on in the groups that are trying to reopen, we anticipate it'll be many months before things get back to anything approaching normal. So I want to keep the pressure on people, on the people we're working with, our funders and partners, other people who support us. And when I say us, I mean groups as well as RDA UK, but to make sure people understand this. As I've said, our survey is going to help with this. I was pleased that Horse and Hound picked this up last week and put an article in about the impact on RDA, or the ongoing impact. And although to much of the world, Horse and Hound is a niche publication in some sense, they signal very clearly to the equestrian community that the crisis is far from over for RDA and we need support. We've been working with a media agency as well, and through their generous support, we managed to get a radio interview syndicated into about 250 local radio stations, reaching several million people. Again, some of these were quite niche. I'm not sure how much response I'll get from the patients listening to Colchester Hospital Radio, but in other areas we had big listener numbers, and it was really important to get this message out. I hope some of your groups will have benefited from our call for support. So as I've said before, organisations like ours provide a vital service I think in a quiet and dedicated way. We don't ask for much and we deliver a massive amount. In times like this, our service is even more important for our riders and drivers, but also for the volunteers and supporters who get involved and are part of our community. If we get left behind in a more general feeling of people wanting to move on, communities across the UK will be losing a vital asset. So we're doing all we can to stop them from happening. We have a powerful story to tell, so I encourage you to get out there and tell it to anyone who will listen, as we are doing. And if you need help with this, please ask. So that's enough of me ranting about that, and I'll come off my soapbox. Finally, I wanted just to highlight one of the things we're doing, both to bring to the forefront what's actually happening, but at the same time celebrating the amazing work that so many people have been doing within the organisation. Those of you that use Twitter will know that we're in the middle of a month of shout-outs where we're showcasing and congratulating people who've done something noteworthy to support their group or the people within it over the next few months. Over the last few months even. It's a good way for us to highlight just how much is happening and the importance of all the things that these people are doing. And this can be simply from keeping in touch with participants, keeping them engaged and aware of what's going on, to looking after horses, or in some cases going that extra mile to help get the group open again. We want to hear these stories and we want to celebrate the people who've done this work. So if you know someone who needs who you think deserves a shout out, let us know and we'll do that. And while I'm here, congratulations and thanks to today's September shout out, which goes to Jackie Rubin, who as chair of the Unicorn Centre in Middlesbrough, has really stepped up over the past few months to encourage, support and stay in touch with everybody involved with the centre. So thanks, Jackie, you're a great example. We're also working up to our annual National Volunteer Awards, which this year, unsurprisingly, will have a particular emphasis on what's happened to get through the last 6 months. Your group should have received information about how to apply for this. It will be on the volunteering section of our website, but if you want more information, please get in touch with Faye here, who will be happy to help. So that's all I really wanted to say, and I hope this has been useful and thought-provoking. And as I said, I hope that I can reassure those of you that are open that we're grateful and behind what you're doing, and those of you who haven't been able to open yet, that we really, really do support you. I think now more than ever is a challenging and complicated time, and I want to reiterate our determination and support to you through this time. We're doing all we can to try and make things happen, and hopefully that's enabling you to really support your riders and drivers. So thank you very much for all of that, and in the meantime, I hope that we'll see you soon and get out and about. But thanks for all your hard work and have a great weekend. Thank you.